Imagine falling from the sky.
Yeah.
You're just locked inside a $67 million fireball. And you have like exactly 5 seconds to escape before hitting the ground.
It's terrifying just to think about.
Right. Well, welcome to another deep dive. Today we are looking at a catastrophe that basically unfolded right in front of thousands of people and the razor-thin margins that somehow kept everyone alive.
Yeah, it's a crazy one.
But before we get into the physics and, the sheer terror of this mid-air collision, please take a second right now to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on that notification bell. It is truly the absolute best way to ensure you never miss our deep dives.
Right. Definitely do that. And actually, we do have a mandatory update to cover first regarding the ongoing Martin Stevens versus OpenAI matter.
Yes, very important.
We need to state explicitly that this matter is not a lawsuit. While we are continuing to monitor the situation closely, we're currently in a deliberate, voluntary, quiet period, and that is at the direct request of Martin Stevens.
Right, exactly. And to be absolutely clear on this,
Yeah.
we do not know if any progress toward a settlement has been made.
Yeah, we have no idea.
And we must not give the impression that one is underway. We are simply, respecting the requested pause. But most importantly, we can report that the dead man's switch has not been activated.
Which is great news.
It is, meaning Martin Stevens is still safe, both physically and legally. So we're just going to leave that there for now.
Right, we'll keep you updated. But kind of going back to that sudden interruption of a waiting period, right? That split-second shift from a controlled routine to utter chaos.
Yeah.
That is essentially what happened in the skies over Idaho. So we are looking at May 17th, 2026. This was a mid-air collision between two U.S. Navy EA-18G Growlers at the Mountain Home Air Force Base.
And the mission for our deep dive today is to understand exactly how, two fighter jets collided directly over a crowded public air show, and yet it resulted in 4 safe ejections and 0 spectator injuries.
It's basically a miracle.
It is. It's a terrifyingly close call, and it reveals a lot about how aviation safety actually works in practice. So, where do we start?
Well, to really grasp the reality of this outcome, we have to start right at the point of impact.
Okay.
It was 12:10 p.m. on a Sunday. This was during the Gunfighter Skies air show. And this was like a massive community event. Actually, its first return to the base since 2018.
Right, so tons of people watching. And up in the sky, you have these 2 Growlers from the Vikings demonstration team flying out of Whidbey Island, Washington.
Yeah.
And they're performing a low-altitude, slow-speed maneuver. And we actually have a super clear view of what went wrong because a spectator named Shane Ogden was filming the whole thing.
And that footage is it's hard to watch.
The sequence he caught on camera is genuinely chilling. The jets appeared to just literally lock together in midair. One is essentially riding right on top of the other one.
Because they're entangled, right?
Exactly. And because they're entangled, they immediately pitch upward, they lose all their lift, and they just stall.
And once they stall, they just become a falling mass of metal. There's no aerodynamics anymore.
Wow.
They cartwheeled toward the ground, and they explode in this massive fireball about 2 miles northwest of the base.
And that sparked a whole other issue, right?
Yeah, the crash was so violent, it sparked a 25-acre brush fire that completely shut down Highway 67 and 167.
The visual unfolding is staggering, but
Yeah.
the timeline is what really gets me.
Oh, for sure.
For everyone listening, next time you are sitting at a red light, just count to 5. That mundane, tiny slice of time waiting for a traffic signal to change. That is the entirety of the window these 4 aviators had.
Yeah, just 5 seconds.
5 seconds between the initial impact of their aircraft and successfully ejecting from a tumbling wreck. 5 seconds to realize they collided, accept that the aircraft are completely dead, and pull the handle.
And the specific conditions of the maneuver actually severely compounded that danger.
How so?
Well, former Top Gun instructor Dave Burke analyzed the footage, and he pointed out the physics working against them. Because the planes were flying at a very low altitude and relatively slow speeds, their kinetic energy was minimal.
So they basically had no momentum to rely on.
Exactly. When you are flying high and fast, you have altitude to trade for time.
Right.
If something goes wrong, you can point the nose down, trade that altitude for airspeed, and kind of troubleshoot the problem.
But low and slow.
When you are low and slow, you have no altitude to give. Gravity just takes over instantly. The ground is coming up fast, and you're just out of options.
Yeah. And Burke noted that because of this, the margin for error in this ejection was practically non-existent.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that the skill and training of these crews are obviously unmatched.
Oh, absolutely.
But even Burke admitted that when the investigation concludes, the aviators will likely tell you there was a massive amount of luck involved for all four of them to survive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the margin was so small, I kind of want to look at the machines themselves.
Why is flying these specific jets so perilous, even when they aren't, taking fire in a combat zone?
Well, the EA-18G Growler is a highly specialized variant of the FA-18 Super Hornet. It isn't just a fighter jet, it's entirely dedicated to electronic warfare.
Okay, so what does that mean practically?
Its primary job is to hunt down and blind enemy radar and surface-to-air missile systems.
Wait, how does it actually do that? Like, how do you blind a radar?
It essentially floods enemy frequencies. The Growler carries these wingtip pods and underwing jammers that basically blast targeted electronic noise at enemy sensors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it overwhelms the adversary systems so they cannot lock onto friendly strike packages that are coming in behind the Growlers. It is effectively a flying supercomputer strapped to two jet engines.
And I imagine managing that level of electronic attack while flying a jet at hundreds of miles an hour is probably too much for one brain to handle.
Oh, it's a massive cognitive load,
Yeah.
which is why the Growler holds a crew of two.
Ah,
You have a pilot in the front seat who is totally focused on flying the aircraft and evading threats, and an electronic warfare officer in the back seat operating all the jamming systems.
right. And even in peacetime, just flying these machines carries a severe baseline risk.
Mm.
I was looking at the Navy Safety Command mishap slides for this deep dive, and military aviation operates with constant peril.
It really does.
Like in fiscal year 2024 alone, there were 9 Class A aviation mishaps across the Navy.
Yeah, and a Class A mishap is the military's most severe category.
What does that entail exactly?
It means an incident resulting in a fatality, permanent total disability, the complete destruction of an aircraft, or damages exceeding $2.5 million.
Which is a huge deal.
It is. Tragically, this mountain home collision is not an isolated incident for this specific community. Back in October 2024, an EA-18G from the exact same Whidbey Island base crashed during a low-level training mission near Mount Rainier in Washington.
And that one was fatal, right?
Yes, killing both crew members on board.
Man, so we know the stakes are literal life and death.
Yeah.
And we know they had 5 seconds to escape this time.
Yeah.
But with 2 people in each cockpit, how does that actually work mechanically? I mean, if the pilot pulls the ejection handle, do both seats fire?
I do, yeah.
And how does that affect the geometry of escaping a tangled wreck where 2 jets are literally stuck together? You have 4 human beings who need to blast out of there at the exact same time without colliding with each other or all that debris.
It's incredibly complex. The ejection sequence in a multi-seat aircraft relies on something called command sequencing.
Command sequencing. Okay.
Usually, if either crew member pulls the handle, both seats will initiate. But they cannot fire at the exact same millisecond.
Because they'd hit each other.
Exactly. If they fired at the same time, the rocket motors would burn the other crew member, or the seats would literally collide in midair.
So they have to stagger the launch.
Right. The rear seat, the electronic warfare officer fires first.
Yeah?
A fraction of a second later, the front seat fires.
Wow, just a fraction of a second.
Yeah. And on top of the timing, the rocket motors beneath the seats are slightly angled. One seat diverges slightly to the left and the other slightly to the right, which forces their flight paths away from each other.
And an ejection isn't a gentle ride anyway. I mean, it is a violent explosion designed to get you away from the plane as fast as physically possible.
Absolutely. It subjects the human body to immense G-forces, often compressing the spine.
Jeez.
Furthermore, modern ejection seats have barostatic sensors.
What do those do?
The seat itself calculates the altitude and speed the moment it leaves the aircraft. If you eject at 30,000 feet, the sensor knows the air is too thin to breathe and too cold to survive.
Oh, so it delays the parachute.
Exactly. It drops a small drogue chute just to stabilize the seat and lets you free fall to a thicker, warmer altitude before deploying the main canopy.
But in this case, they were super low to the ground.
Right. The sensors read the low altitude and instantly deployed the main parachutes. But multiply that flawless mechanical sequencing by 2 aircraft locked together and tumbling.
It's mind-boggling.
The safe escape of 4 crew members from a spinning mass of metal requires perfectly timed explosive technology operating in a completely unpredictable environment.
Which brings up a huge question for me. If these machines operate right on the edge of disaster like that, and accidents happen even to highly trained demonstration teams, how do organizers ensure the spectators aren't killed?
It's a great question.
Because there were thousands of people watching from the ground that day.
Yeah, and the entire airshow industry relies on a fanatical adherence to safety protocols. If you read the FAA and Navy F-18 demonstration manual, the rules are basically absolute laws.
What kind of rules?
The manual explicitly states, the flight demonstration is absolutely secondary to the safety of the aircrew and spectators.
Meaning, if an aviator has to choose between saving a $67 million asset or protecting the crowd, they put the jet in the dirt every single time.
Without hesitation. The routines are mathematically structured around minimum altitudes and specific speeds.
Like hard limits.
Right. For example, the manual details that during a vertical or flat pirouette maneuver, the pilot should never see their airspeed drop below 100 kCAS.
Okay, KCAS, that's knots calibrated airspeed, right?
Right, which is basically a measure of dynamic pressure. It tells the pilot how much actual air is flowing over the wings to generate lift.
Okay, makes sense.
If the number drops below 100, there just isn't enough air moving over the wings to keep the jet flying. So the manual dictates that if they hit that threshold, they must immediately terminate the maneuver to avoid entering an unrecoverable stall.
And the manual also dictates exactly where they're allowed to recover if things go wrong, doesn't it?
Yes. Priority is always given to recovering away from the crowd. They call these dive recovery rules. The pilots essentially draw invisible boxes in the sky.
Okay.
If the aircraft leaves the parameters of the safe box, the pilot executes the recovery protocol instantly, even if it means ruining the aesthetic flow of the show.
It's kind of like touching a hot stove.
How do you mean?
Well, you don't consciously calculate the temperature of the burner, or think about the thermal limits of your skin. Your spinal cord just yanks your hand back before your brain even registers the pain.
That's a really good way to put it.
That's what the constant simulator training does for these pilots, right?
Exactly. It totally eliminates cognitive processing time. When you only have 5 seconds between a midair collision and a fiery impact, you cannot rely on complex mental calculus.
There's no time to think.
Right. The FAA manual mandates relentless simulator training specifically to build that muscle memory for sudden emergencies, like an engine failure or severe wind shear.
And the environmental data showed the weather was definitely a factor that Sunday. The National Weather Service reported wind gusts up to 29 miles per hour around the time of the crash.
The winds were so severe that organizers had actually canceled the parachute jump performances earlier in the day.
Which explains why, when spectators saw 4 parachutes suddenly appear in the sky right after a loud bang, they immediately knew it wasn't part of the routine.
Yeah, that must have been a terrifying realization for the crowd. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the fact that no spectators were harmed is a testament to those invisible boxes in the sky.
Yeah, the protocols really worked.
They did. John Cudahy, the president of the International Council of Air Shows, provided some context on just how effective these protocols are. Decades ago, the United States used to average about 2 deaths a year at air shows.
Okay.
Over the past 10 years, that average has dropped to roughly 1 death a year, and it is almost universally a pilot.
Wow. And do you know when the last time a spectator on the ground was killed at a U.S. air show was?
When was it?
1952.
Wow.
Over 70 years ago. Think about how many millions of people have attended air shows over the past 7 decades. That record proves the safety lines drawn by the military and the FAA are genuinely working.
They are working, but, those rules were written in blood. They were shaped by harsh, devastating lessons. And Mountain Home Air Force Base actually has a haunted history that has directly influenced the exact regulations we're talking about today.
The history of the base makes the survival of these 4 Growler aviators even more poignant, honestly.
Yeah, it really does.
The 2026 Gunfighter Skies event was the first air show held at Mountain Home in 8 years. The base paused the event after a fatal incident in 2018 where a civilian hang glider pilot crashed during his performance.
And beyond air shows, the base has suffered other tragic losses. In 2022, a devastating Humvee accident during a training exercise claimed the life of a 19-year-old Air Force ROTC cadet.
That's just awful.
Yeah.
The base definitely carries the weight of these events.
It does. But the incident that echoes loudest through the aviation community, the one with really eerie parallels to our Growler crash, happened at Mountain Home back in 2003.
Oh, all right.
It involved a performance by the Thunderbirds, the Air Force's elite demonstration squadron.
The 2003 Thunderbirds F-16C crash. It's almost a legendary case study in aviation safety now.
It really is.
The pilot, Captain Chris Strickland, was attempting a maneuver called a split S immediately after takeoff.
For those who don't know, what exactly is a split S?
It is essentially an upside-down Haas loop. The pilot rolls the jet completely on its back so the canopy is facing the earth, and then pulls back hard on the stick to dive toward the ground in reverse direction.
Sounds tense.
Because you are diving directly toward the earth to complete the loop, the maneuver eats up a massive amount of altitude incredibly fast.
Right, and Strickland had performed this exact maneuver perfectly over 200 times.
Over 200.
Yeah, but on this day, he miscalculated his starting altitude. He thought he had enough room to pull out of the dive, but he basically just ran out of sky.
Oh, man.
He managed to guide the jet away from the crowd and ejected less than 1 second before the F-16 hit the runway and exploded. He survived with only minor injuries.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit. Mountain Home Air Force Base is located on a high desert plateau. It sits roughly 3,000 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
Does that elevation play a role in a pilot misjudging their altitude during a vertical dive?
Yes, that physical geography is the exact root cause of the 2003 crash. Yeah, it comes down to a fatal cognitive dissonance regarding how altitude is measured. There are 2 primary ways to measure it. AGL, which is above ground level, and AMSL, which is above mean sea level.
So AGL is how far you are from the dirt directly beneath your jet, and AMSL is how far you are from the ocean.
Correct. Now, if you do most of your training over the ocean or near sea level, AMSL and AGL are identical numbers.
Right.
So the pilot's brain subconsciously links the number on the altimeter directly to the visual distance to the ground. But Mountain Home is on a plateau.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The ground is essentially 3,000 feet closer to the plane than the sea level altitude suggests.
Your instruments are telling you one thing, but your eyes are telling you another.
Exactly. Prior to 2003, ground controllers at air shows were giving pilots altitude readings in above ground level, but the pilots were looking at instruments calibrated to above mean sea level.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was. The pilot had to do mental math in the cockpit to reconcile the 2 numbers while pulling massive G-forces.
Which is nearly impossible.
Captain Strickland initiated his split S based on an incorrect mean sea level elevation for Mountain Home. He climbed to only 1,670 feet above the ground instead of the required 2,500 feet.
Wow. He literally did not have the physical space to pull the nose up before hitting the dirt.
Exactly.
How did that realization change the regulations for everyone else moving forward?
It forced a universal standardization. Following the investigation, the Air Force mandated that demonstration pilots and ground controllers must work exclusively in above mean sea level altitudes.
So no more mental math.
No more mental math conversions during high-speed maneuvers. Additionally, they required pilots to climb an extra 1,000 feet before performing the split S purely to add a safety buffer.
See, every single line in the safety manual exists to prevent history from repeating itself. The hard lessons from Strickland's split-second ejection in 2003 directly built the institutional knowledge that allowed the 4 Growler aviators to survive their collision in 2026.
That's so true. The margins of safety are fiercely protected by that institutional memory. You analyze the failure, you change the math, and you enforce the new boundaries.
And the core takeaway here for you listening is that surviving a disaster isn't just about the incredible technology of fighter jets. It's about how intense, unyielding preparation allows humans to navigate the absolute worst-case scenarios.
Yeah, preparation is everything.
When 2 jets lock together and stall, the margin for error drops to absolute 0. But because of the relentless simulator training that bypassed human hesitation, the strict dive recovery rules that kept the planes away from the crowd, and the flawless sequencing of the ejection hardware, 4 families didn't lose their loved ones on a Sunday afternoon in Idaho.
It really highlights the absolute peak of human resilience and engineering.
It does.
But, as we look to the future of aviation, it leaves us with the provocative thought to sort of mull over.
What's that?
Well, we established that the human reaction window during this mid-air collision was about 5 seconds, right? And that was barely enough time to save 4 lives. But aviation is moving rapidly toward automated flight systems and artificial intelligence.
Okay, but where does AI fit into an ejection scenario?
Well, think about it. If human reflexes and cognitive processing times are the ultimate bottleneck in a life or death emergency, how will automated systems change the split-second calculus of the ejection seat?
Oh, wow.
Will there come a day when the aircraft's computers, processing millions of data points a second, override human reflexes entirely?
That's a crazy thought.
Imagine a system that predicts a catastrophic collision is mathematically unavoidable, and it decides to fire the ejection seats and blast the pilot out of the aircraft before the human brain even consciously registers that a crash is happening.
So giving a computer the authority to literally blow the roof off the plane and launch you into the sky because it knows your human nervous system can't react fast enough.
Yeah.
The ultimate hot stove reflex, but completely outsourced to a machine.
Exactly. It fundamentally changes the definition of who or what is actually in control of the cockpit when the margins drop to zero.
It really does. Wow, that is a lot to think about. Well, that wraps up our exploration for today. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Mountain Home mid-air collision.
Yes, thanks for listening.
If you found this breakdown as fascinating as we did, please do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on that notification bell right now. It supports the show and guarantees you will be right here with us for our next exploration. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.